Hello! Today we're going to talk about sending and receiving SMS text messages from SharePoint. We're all used to the concept of getting email notifications based on updates in SharePoint and SharePoint lists. All of us are buried in email. We tend to get a lot of email notifications, and therefore it's easy for those to be ignored or lost, and they're not always very effective. In contrast, text notifications tend to get noticed right away, and they can trigger a fast response. We're going to look at how to set that up and how you can implement this strategy to get the attention of your users based on SharePoint updates. So now, let's get SharePoint smart. Okay, so here I am in SharePoint Online, and I've got just a simple list which really is for nothing more to demonstrate our goal. And our goal is to be able to trigger sending text messages from SharePoint, and then additionally to be able to receive a response from a user replying to text messages for some kind of updates, that type of thing. We'll begin by showing what this functionality gives us, and then afterwards we'll demonstrate how it is that you're able to set this up and use this type of functionality in your SharePoint environment. Okay, so I'm going to create a new record. This is a customized form I created using a third-party software, which is Ultimate Forms. If you have questions about that, post a message below the video and I'll be sure to help you out. And so I'm just putting in the name of the recipient and the text number. It wants a particular format, which I'm entering my number using that format. And then I'll just put in whatever message it is that I want texted out. Okay, so I'll say, we are ready to get started on the Cherries project. And then I'm going to click this green button to send a text message. And that's it. And I've got my phone next to me, so I should hear a little bloop and we'll get a little message from here. This is using a third-party service called Twilio. I'm going to talk more about that as we get further along in our video. Sometimes it takes me a little bit of time to get my text notifications because I'm not real close to my cell tower. Okay, so that will send out the text notification. And then the other part of this is we also would like to be able to receive text notifications. So I'm going to type a message on my phone, responding to the message, and we can do that type of update too. And by the way, I did just get my text notification that I just sent. All right, so we'll reply back. I'll say, sounds good to me. I'll put a couple of emojis in there just for fun. Okay, and that triggers a workflow that's going to update my SharePoint record. And I have a column called inbound message. There it is. Sounds good to me. That's what I just punched into my phone. Okay, so let me go back into the record. I've got some logging in here to help me keep track of when these updates are taking place, that type of thing. So that's just some basics just to record what I'm doing. But of course you can use other concepts and have response triggers and things like that according to what response you're getting from users. Okay, so for the rest of our video, we're going to talk about what it is that you do to set up this type of functionality. Okay, the first thing that you need to do is you need to create your own account in Twilio. Twilio is a third-party service. It is a relatively inexpensive way to facilitate a phone number dedicated for sending and receiving text messages. And this is what we can use and tie into. We can use their API to send and receive those text messages. So you will need to create an account. And then once you've done that, you are going to be given your account SID and auth token. And you need this information for our other steps, which we're going to do in Flow. Once you've got that, you can establish a phone number, and you can do things like track how many messages are going on, that type of thing. So I can click on that and go to the dashboard. And then if I click on see all phone numbers, these are phone numbers I'm using in Twilio right now. Of course, I'm going to blur out some things in my video because I don't necessarily want to show any private information. But then for each phone number, I can set up special conditions and rules. There's one key one which has to do with post. And that means when we receive a message of this number, I need to do something, okay? And in the case of this, I need to call a particular URL to do an HTTP post method. We'll have a listener in Flow that's going to be called. That's our trigger point, and we need that for receiving text messages to SharePoint by way of Flow. Okay, so we're not going to go into granular details about Twilio Setup. They have tutorials in their site. It's not very hard. It's pretty inexpensive. Their pricing is $1 a month per phone number, and then less than a penny per message that is sent by the service. Unless you're in a very high volume scenario, it's pretty inexpensive and not going to break the bank to set this up. Okay, so first of all, let's focus on the easier of the two functions that we're trying to do, and that is triggering messages to be sent by SharePoint. And even if you only use SharePoint to send messages this way, that's already very effective in terms of getting the attention of your users. Receiving the messages back to SharePoint is a bit more of an advanced concept, but we'll get into that in a second. Okay, so let's take a look at the workflow in Power Automate to send text messages. Okay. This is typically going to be triggered by an update in a SharePoint list. Okay, so when that's modified, I'm looking for a particular condition. I made a field called send text message, and whenever that's changed to true, then that's when I'm going to call this Twilio service to send a text message. Now again, you do need to set up your Twilio account and phone number first before you go into Power Automate to do any of this workflow. So make sure you have that all set up and you've got your auth token and ID for your account, and then you can make that connection. There is a Twilio function block, and you will be able to go in there, and the first thing you need to do is add a connection to your account, which you've created already. So you just click on add new connection. I've already got one for myself in there. It'll ask you for name, and that's where you're going to put in that account ID and access token. Really simple and easy to set up. Once it's connected to that, it's already going to pick up the phone number that you set up. In my case, I've got multiple phone numbers. And then from there, it's pretty straightforward. It just has two fields. There's a phone number and a text. So that's the number that we're sending to, which of course can be dynamic. In my case, you saw that I entered a phone number, and then I'm just passing along what I had in that text message field. And then there's one last thing I'm doing. If you remember, I had that yes, no field for send a text message. And basically, I'm sending a text message on that SharePoint record update only in the case that's true. So I need to turn that back off because obviously I don't want to keep shooting out text messages. It's only when that that flag gets tripped, and that's what my button in my form did. And that's about it. Sending text messages is pretty easy. Once you have your Twilio account set up, I can use this action block whenever I need, and I can use that connector to Twilio. Really not very complicated. I just have to pass along the phone number. I do need to make sure it's in the correct format, otherwise you're going to get an error in your flow, and then the message body in there. Now, just a side note, if you send a message that exceeds 255 characters, what happens is that's automatically handled. It basically sends an additional message or multiple messages, and modern smartphones automatically handle that and consolidate it into one message. So you really do not have to worry about the character limit on messages for the most part. Of course, you want to be concise with what you're sending, but functionally it's going to work fine if you have more than that character limit. And that's about it when it comes to sending messages. As I say, that's pretty clean and simple, and that's for sure where you want to begin. You want to get that working first. Now, a more advanced concept is letting your user then respond to those messages and taking actions according to that. Now, probably most of you have seen this type of functionality going on. I'll give you an example. When I have dentist appointments, my dentist office has a system where I get messages telling me that my appointment's coming up. And it asks me to confirm that by way of replying to the text message. It'll say something like, reply C to confirm. Okay? That's an example of something where you're facilitating the user and reminding them of that key appointment. Of course, for my dentist office, they don't want to have people not show up for their appointments. That wastes their money and time, and that's bad for them. So this automated system is really helpful. So that's just an example where receiving the message could help. You could listen for a particular response and then set up flow to do whatever actions you need automatically. Okay, so that just explains why it is that people may want to respond to a message, or you may want to capture a response from them. Okay, now to do that, we actually need to use two flows to get this to work how we want. The first one, this is a HTTP connector, and I do want to demonstrate initially how you set those up. Okay, so I'm going to create a new flow, and I'm just going to call this HTTP example. One thing I want to tell you is when you search for that trigger, you're not going to find it. I don't know why that is, but it's not a problem. Just type skip or click skip. And then in the next box, if you type HTTP, then you're going to see what you need to see. Okay. The two flow triggers that we need for these two flows for receiving, it is the HTTP request received. It is a premium connector. I don't want to delve into the nuances of that, but you do need to have a plan that allows for the premium connector. For sending messages, you don't need a premium connector, but you do in this case. Okay, When you select that, it's going to give you this gray box and it says URL will be generated after save. Okay, so you need to go ahead and enter some information, search your flow, and save it. And after you do that, Flow is going to automatically generate a URL for you that then becomes fixed. You can copy that and we'll need that reference. Okay, I'm going to close out of this because I don't actually want to do this step. Okay, so let's look at the first part. This is kind of a two-step operation. It's broken into two flows. And we're going to edit this flow so we can take a look and see what's going on. So I started this flow by doing the step I just showed you. And once I first save that, it then provides this URL which I need for reference. Okay? What I need to do is copy that URL, and this URL needs to be called by Twilio when a text message is sent to that number that I just set up. Okay? It's not very hard to do. You just go to that number and it's under your options in Twilio for messaging, and you use the option webhook and HTTP post, and you paste in that URL that you have in Power Automate. Okay? Once you've put that into Twilio, you won't have to do any further configuration in Twilio. It's a pretty simple concept once it's in there. What you're saying is call this URL every time a message comes in, and it will have a message body which will pass along to the flow. Okay? Once you've got that, this first action is pretty straightforward. Okay, so we're going to use this HTTP action. Okay, so this is another one that you need to do, which is similar. In this case, we're making a call instead of receiving the request. Okay, and that is also found by just typing HTTP. That's where you see, that's a premium connector. It just says HTTP. Okay. Already got that, so I don't want to do it again. And then the format of the body is important. Okay. So we have these trigger form data values. You do have to use this syntax. Okay. So you can see it there. So I have the from, who it's coming from, and the message. Okay, we need those two pieces of information. Okay, and then I've got this URL for what I'm going to call. This is the second flow. Okay, so I need to update this, and I need to use the URL that I get in the second flow. Okay, so where did I get that? That's the second part of this. So the first part is actually just these two blocks. Pretty clean, pretty simple, not a lot to do in the formatting. Okay, so these both start out the same way. So I will go into the second part of this. And this is what's actually going to make the update in SharePoint. Okay, same deal as before. When you create the new flow with the HTTP request method, it's going to give you the URL. So the URL that you saw referenced in that last block is coming from here. So once this second step was generated, I just have to get the flow started and saved. It'll give me the URL. I pasted that back over there. Okay, so that's going to call this, but now we're actually changing the data and formatting it, so it's going to allow us to do what we want to do. Okay, so if you'll notice in the body of this, we have the JSON formatted data, and we just have two strings. Okay, we have one for the from value and one which is the actual message. Okay, two string values. We need to create the variables, and we're going to hold that. And now we can go ahead and call our SharePoint list. And in my case, what I'm looking to do, I want to make an update according to who that came from. Okay, if you imagine a scenario, you've got all these different users. So there is an assumption here that you have the unique cell phone number of the users in this kind of scenario. because you're going to match back against the record. So what I'm saying is make an update for me or get me the records where that text number is matching up against the person who just sent the text message. Okay? Once I've got that record, now I can make my update. Okay? And just to keep things simple in this scenario, all that we did is pass the message from that text and we wrote it back to the field which is inbound message. So this last part of the flow is a very common action in a flow, which is just to simply update a SharePoint list record. These first fields, it's just passing the value that's already in there. We have to do that because those are required fields, and that will pass it back. Now what's important to do if you're working through these steps and get stuck is to try it out. Send the message, and if there's an error, you can troubleshoot based on the response you get. Now this may seem tricky when you first set it up. I will admit it took me quite a bit of time troubleshooting to figure out how to get this working. But the really great thing about this is once you have set this up one time and you understand how it works, you have those flows for reference. And repeating that same template in another list or for another phone number is really straightforward because you have all the information in front of you. I can log into my Twilio account. I know just where to go. I can look at these flow blocks and reference those and see just exactly the correct format that I need to set up. So basically I can just copy this pattern, reuse it, and apply this anywhere that I need to. And that phone number really can be used for all kinds of different lists in SharePoint. So you don't necessarily need to create different phone numbers. In my case, I work with different customers, and typically what I'll do is help them. I'll get a phone number that's specific to where they're located, and they'll have their own dedicated phone number for their users to use. And what's better is if you tell those users what that number is so they are expecting those messages, and they can actually put it in their contacts list so that it identifies and understand, oh yeah, that's for our project tool updates. So it's known. Okay, so this is a bit more of an advanced topic, but it is an important one. My advice to you is to focus first on sending text messages from SharePoint. It doesn't require any of the HTTP post or receive methods, and you don't have to deal with any complex concepts or logic with that. In general, all you're looking to do is trigger sending that message for a basic condition. Okay, so that's the place you want to begin. Setting up a Twilio account is very easy. The interface may seem a little bit hard at first because it's hard to know exactly where you're supposed to go. But with a little bit of exploration and patience, it's really not that hard. Basically, you just create your account and provide them a credit card so they're able to charge you for the service, which is inexpensive. And then you create a phone number, which is your dedicated phone number for sending messages. So start there. Use that Twilio text message function. And that flow is a pretty straightforward, easy flow to set up. Once you're comfortable with that methodology, then you're ready to come back and explore the more advanced concept, which is receiving text messages through that service by using those HTTP connectors and then setting up the conditional logic so you can handle that response and listen for keywords such as approved or confirm or something of that nature. I hope you found this useful. If you aren't already doing it, I hope this is what you need to get you over the hump so that you begin to use SMS text messaging as a method to notify users, as an alternative attention-getting way to give them that key information. Something that in many cases can be much more effective than email notifications. Thank you and good luck.